So I put this presentation together a while back because when I've been working with companies around the globe, about 50% of the people that are doing Agile can get into a fairly big mess, and about 50% of the people I meet that are doing Agile or Scrum are really having a good time and they're getting good results, and they're not really having many challenges in Agile. So I looked through the data to figure out what practices are people doing where they do well at Agile Scrum, and what practices the leaders do when they're doing less well. And I tried to organize that into 10 steps that people can kind of select and then use going forward. So the symptoms I'll discuss at the beginning, kind of oil and water, where the management team is kind of getting frustrated with the IT or development team and vice versa. Prediction versus discovery. A lot of Agilists want to discover as they go, and that can cause business frustration. A starting point, a common goal that leaders can then use with their teams to get them to kind of come together. And then I'll go through the 10 practices and explain those in context. And then 5 actions that teams can take at the very end. And then we'll have time for a Q&A round. See, I've been working with teams for 28 years or 27 years overall, and Agile Scrum has been popular probably for 15 or 16 years over that time period. And when I meet teams that are having difficulty or challenges, management is typically frustrated with unpredictable release dates. Although the teams focus on features and delivery of value, etc., what the management really cares about is being able to predict when things are done and then either earn revenue or deliver value or make promises or fulfill promises to their clients. And if they can't do those things as a manager or as a leader, they get very frustrated. So if they can't predict revenue, if they see projects kind of drag on 2 weeks at a time or every sprint, they're still not done and they need another sprint, they're really in a kind of a discovery versus prediction mode. If customer needs are discovered continually, so there's really no clear list of what the needs actually are in a backlog, and what is defined is a little incomplete or very incomplete, and they discover things continually, then that kind of pushes the delivery date out continually too. When the management see more labor or effort being expended than they could ever earn back, either earn back in terms of recognition from their IT audience or their business users, or earn back if they're selling the system for money, that causes a lot of frustration. And then if things get very sloppy, which some teams do and some teams don't, like testing resources increase, defect repairs increase, and support costs to keep the system up and running after delivery, that can cause further frustration. From a purely manager perspective, they have a payroll. They have a kind of a head count they're paying for and are held accountable for that. And if they see less and less work coming out because people are consumed in bugs and rework and testing and retesting and delays, then they see a complete mismatch between the expenses they're paying and what they're really getting out of that. So without some due diligence here, there's a disconnect between the way leadership would like to see things work or they expect and the way teams actually operate. And then what kind of compounds this is that if the leadership then asks the team, now what is going on with this Agile stuff, if the team's only response is, no, we're Agile, it'll work out, that's not particularly appealing to leadership. And there can be a big kind of a big gap between what leadership want and how they manage, and how teams perform and how they manage themselves. So again, 50% of the groups I work with, they're doing great, they don't have a problem, and 50% are challenged to different degrees. And we're going to go through some examples of how we could uncover that challenge and then maybe resolve it. So one of the underlying issues that is kind of baked into both Scrum and the way management expects things to run is this prediction versus discovery. If Scrum or Agile becomes a little too sloppy, they really don't decide on a release for the system, and therefore they allow themselves to discover every 2 weeks. And because they are discovering, they're keeping busy, and they're getting feedback, then they may see no really desire to have a fixed deadline or a fixed release or whatever. And they may have even kind of read that some Scrum versions or Scrum definitions have actually done away with the release plan. And they may have even rationalized that this is a good thing not to have one. This is fine and dandy if you have an unlimited budget, unlimited time, and customers that are either happy with being fed pieces at a time, or you have kind of enough bandwidth to cope with this ongoing discovery activity. But from a pure leadership perspective, this can get them very upset. And then I've actually heard from some Agile team members, or even managers below the leaders, and they just say, we're going to just start Agile, everything will work out because of the feedback loops, as if the feedback loops in the sprint review are going to really cover feedback on everything. What the feedback loops really cover is feedback on the feature or the features built in that last sprint. It doesn't cover feedback on risk or the release or the direction we're heading in or the overall goals. It really kind of covers feedback on the feature and the thing we built in the previous sprint. So really the feedback loops, they do a good job at keeping the team focused on valuable features, but they don't do much really for the bigger problem, which is where is our money going to and when will we finish. So that's the gap I want to try to resolve in the presentation. Now, if I look over the last, in my case, 28 years of looking at programs and projects, ones that are doing extremely well and ones that are challenged, I would say it really comes down to a couple of factors. One is that there is a PM over the team. That could be a Scrum Master, kind of the new language for PM. It could be a PM that has more skills than the Scrum Master. And then secondly, that PM is given the whole goal. They're not given a sprint goal or 2 sprints to work on, like in 4 weeks have these features done and in 2 weeks have those features done. They're given the whole goal, all the customer needs, or the chance to go collect those over time. They're given the deadline, or at least the desired deadline, which they can then negotiate. They're told to beat the competition, so they understand the competitive issues, either financial or deadline issues. They are listed and they clarify quality expectations. They are given a budget of people or money. They may even be given a profit goal, which they should not exceed, or kind of make a loss on the project from a financial or a labor perspective, and they're given resource constraints. So when they're given the whole goal, then the team can then do the trade-offs. So the team then has to figure out how many sprints, what we do, what the long-term picture is, whether we should optimize on every 2 weeks or collect together features for a bigger release. So when the project manager and the team is given the bigger picture, the top of the mountain there, then they start to make very good trade-offs, and they start to kind of hash out, where their money goes to, where their time goes to, what the deadline should be, so they're kind of set up for success. And when teams suffer using Scrum, they don't do that. They are working at a period or a interval period, and management may have something else in that, but it's not well shared, it's not socialized, it's not very clear, and therefore people are living in a level of ambiguity or kind of discovery mode. And so there's a big difference between the way a PM runs a successful project and the way a PM or a Scrum Master kind of struggles through 2 weeks at a time. So in this kind of solution here, the whole team understands the whole goal, or they have a chance to elicit and derive the whole goal, and they then have to do these trade-offs, which keeps them balanced in terms of short and long-term thinking. So let's go through the 10 leadership practices and kind of see how they fall out